Hello everyone, my name is Subroto Shah. I am the faculty member of Dr. Sudhir Chandra Sood Degree Engineering College in Automobile Engineering. In my previous video, I discussed on the topic of coil spring. Now today I am going to discuss about the torsion bar and also the Pherson stud type suspension system. This one is the Pherson stud and this is the torsion bar. This is torsion bar. Okay. So what is torsion bar? This is a straight bar of circular or square section which is fixed to the frame at the one end, and a lever or wishbone shaped member connects its other ends to fixed to the wheels. A torsion bar suspension system used on a car is you can see here, this is the torsion bar suspension system, and the diameter of the torsion bar is increased at each end of the bar, and the bar is connected with the levers by levers. The provision for the adjustment is made at the frame end. In the coil spring is coil spring is also a form of the torsion bar. In the coil spring we see that the spring looks like the helicals, but in case of torsion bar it is circular or the square sections bar. The rate of both spring depends on the length and the diameter. As I told you in my earlier video that the coil spring efficiency or the coil spring capacity is totally depends on the length or the number of turns on the diameter of the springs. Similar here, this torsion bar capacity or efficiency can be predict or can be increased by changing its diameter or its length. The rate decreases or the spring the spring rate is decreased or the spring becomes softer if the length is increased or the diameter is decreased. So it is almost similar to the our coil spring suspension system. So we should remember two things, that is basically the length and the diameter of the torsion bar. If we increase the length or decrease the diameter, the spring or the suspension springs will be more softer than the previous one. Okay, so this one is the torsion bar. Torsion bar basically we can use. You can use in your you can see this type of torsion bar in your ambassador vehicle in which is presented in your or which is situated in your chassis lab. Okay, now I am telling one more suspension system, that is Pherson type suspension system. Pherson type suspension system is one kind of independent type of suspension system, and this kind of suspension system are seen in Maruti vehicles in rear suspension system. In this suspension system, a long telescopic tube incorporating the damper is pivoted at the upper end and rigidly connected to the stub axles at the lower end. A single transverse link attached to the frame by the rubber bushes and connected to the stub axle by the ball joint. So it is also the one kind of independent suspension system which is used in the front suspension in different passenger vehicles or small kind of passengers vehicles like as Maruti Suzuki company made. A single transverse link attached to the frame by rubber bushes and connected to the stub axle at the ball joint. You can see here, this is the bottom portion are connected to the bottom portion is connected with the ball joint, with the ball joint, and it also attached to the stub axle. You know the stub axle? Stub axle is the front axle type, and you see it is in the stub axle. The wheels are mounting on the stub axle, and the stub axle is connected with the steering systems. The coil spring is installed between the fixed and floating suspension members. A stabilizer bar interconnects both front suspension layer links and also provide the required fore and arch stiffness. The ball and socket joints are at the bottom serves as a pivot for the steering struts and the stub axle in the horizontal plane also. These joints also serves a suspension joints for relative movement between the track control arm and the stub axle in the vertical plane. So this stub axle also help to control or steer the vehicle while we are driving a vehicle. Similar to the several other suspension system, the caster angle, camber angle, and swivel axis inclination or kingpin inclination are set during the manufacturing, and that cannot be changed. And you know the caster angle and camber angle. The caster angle and the camber angle is the angle of inclination of the wheels with the stub axle at different conditions, and the caster angle the caster angle is the angle of inclination of the vehicle to the wheels to the vertical planes also. So the swivel axis or inclination on the kingpin inclination in where the kingpin is located, that case the inclination angle is known as kingpin inclination, but in case of swivel axis the inclination angle is known as the swivel axis inclination angle, and this angle is formed between the vertical and the line taken from the center of the start thrust bearing to the center of the ball joint, and which is connect the start to the track control arm. The start is set to a smaller angle than the swivel axis inclination for providing the tire clearance. So tire clearance is also very important factor, because if there is no clearance of tire, that means the wears and tires is also increased, and also the difficulties to control the vehicle to the proper path or the required conditions. So to overcome such problems, you have to provide some tire clearance that will give you or provide you the better steering control. Okay, by the top of the struts toward the vehicle center, it is possible to obtain a negative offset, or the negative offset means the negative stub radius for the steering control. When the coil spring is almost fully compressed, that means this dotted portion are the coil spring. Okay, so it is the view of the side view. So for your proper understanding, this is denoted as a dotted portion. So dotted portion of the coil spring, and this tube shaped is the shock absorber or the telescopic shock absorber, which is consist of the piston rod and the piston, and also the piston and piston rod, which is situated in a cylinder also, and we are using some fluids inside this cylinder so that can move up and down movement, and we can get the better comfort from this type of suspension system. So what are the parts of this McPherson start suspension systems? From the top we can see that the rubber mounting system is here, ball thrust bearing is also here, bump stop or stopper is also provided here to control the movement of the shock absorbers. Coil spring is very important for McPherson start type suspension system. Lower spring seats, piston rods, and these are the portion from these portions, piston rod, leg start cylinder, shock absorber. These are the portion of the shock absorbers, and that portions are the under the coil spring, that is the coil spring lower spring seats, because below that lower spring seats the spring cannot goes further downward. It is also the one kind of spring stopper. Okay, and this assembly is connected with the stub axle, and here from right side you can consider a wheel at that portions. Okay, when the coil spring is almost fully compressed, a bump stop installed at the top of the piston cylinder, or that is the spring stopper. The triangular track control arm is also used here. This is the in below side you can see the track control arm or wishbone member. Okay, that is also attached with the cross member of the frame, and one part of this member is joined to the stub axle with the ball and socket joints. So this triangular track control arm absorbs the driving and the braking thrust reactions also. So this track control arm is also very important to absorb some thrust during the driving of a vehicle or braking of a vehicle. This thrust is totally absorbed by the track control arm. Okay, during taking turn or the cornering, the body rolls and the inner outer wheels respectively link outward and inward, which is depends on the initial angular set of the transverse track control arm, and consequently the both wheels produce a camber roll. Camber roll means the wheel tilted toward the center during the body roll, or wheel enters to the or when the wheel enters to the porthole and tilts inward and body remains upsides. So in that conditions, the track control arm is also very helpful for a vehicle, or gives some advantages to the vehicle. The body, the inward, the wheels, the inner outer wheels respectively lean outward and inward depending on the initial angular set of the transverse track control arm. So it is very, very important for independent type of suspension systems, especially Pherson start type suspension systems. And each wheel of the vehicle is totally dependent of the outer side, due to which the suspension body is not influenced by the smaller wheel deflection during the movement of the car. Okay, so this is the Pherson start type of suspension system. It is very popular in small kind of passenger cars vehicles. So once again, I am discussing on the Pherson start type suspension. And one more thing very important, that is the in case of coil spring, we saw that we are using coil spring in between two wishbone arm, that is upper wishbone arm and the lower wishbone arm. But in case of Pherson start type of suspension system, we are using only lower arm, or the lower control arm, or the lower wishbone arm. So this is the torsion bar, and this is the figure of the Pherson start type suspension system. And a stabilizer bar is also used in front suspension system, which stabilize the vehicle and also to prevent to the rolling tendency of the vehicle. So if you see the one bar is like U-shaped in the front of a vehicle, that is the stabilizer bar. Okay. Now in case of torsion bar is also used as a double transverse arm suspension system. It is also one kind of torsion bar suspension system. The double wishbone suspension system, or the transverse double wishbone suspension system, is incorporate a torsion bar spring in place of helical spring, so that the elastic resistance is also provided to changing the suspension vertical loads. The torsion bar is located, located parallel to the underframe longitudinal members on each side of the vehicle. One end of the torsion bar is splined to the reaction lever and bolted to the underside of the body, while the other end is splined to the lower suspension arm supported by the eye-hole pivot. And during the deflection of the suspension, the lower suspension arm pivoted. This lower suspension arm is pivoted this lower suspension arm are pivoted and twist the torsion bar, which is resisted by the rigidly held reaction lever at the far end of the bar. The upper suspension arm complete the 4-bar chain geometry, due to which the result of stub axle vertical movement is always keep both front road wheels approximately and perpendicular to the ground also. In some systems, the upper suspension arm pivot forms part of a lever type damper unit. In other, a separate telescopic damper is installed or situated in between the subframe and also the lower suspension arm. So it is also very important for the suspension system, and which is easily made or manufactured, because there is no complicacy. There is very simple form of the suspension system, and it is very helpful also. And the eye-hole pivot assembly permits the lower suspension arm to the pivot, as well as the transfer the torsion bar resilience to the suspensions. The lower suspension pivot has one-piece circular eye-hole casting, and the stud bolted the subframes. A splined eye bolt is also located at the center of the slip bush, and which is pressed into the casing. When a lower suspension arm partially rotates, the torsional distortion of the rubber, which takes up entire angular movement, so that frictional sliding between the eye bolt and their inner bush slips is avoided. Okay. And static and dynamic resistance is transferred by the torsion bar and the splines located in the same internally splined hole in the lower suspension arm as in the splined in eye bolt. Hence the torsion bar acts only as a spring and does not pivot the lower suspension arm. A tie bar supports the lower suspension arm and also prevent the horizontal twisting during the acceleration and the braking of the vehicle. So to prevent the horizontal twisting, this torsion bar double transverse arm is also takes a important role, and it also reduce the tendency of the body roll also. Okay, so this one, today's topic is over, and next class we will discuss on the wishbone arm type of suspension system, that is upper wishbone and the lower wishbone. Okay, thank you.